Hello, one and all. I am glad you're with us today. My name is Andrew Recinos. I am president of the Tessitura Network, a nonprofit technology service and community company with a simple mission to advance the business of arts and culture. Welcome to Innovators in Conversation. My guest today is a friend and a colleague. Annie Burridge is General Director and CEO of Austin Opera in Austin, Texas. I first got to know Annie when she was Managing Director at Opera Philadelphia. Here is a photo of us with a group of my Tessitura coworkers at the premiere run of Jennifer Higdon's Cold Mountain at Opera Philadelphia in 2016. Later that same year, Annie took the stage at our Tessitura Learning and Community Conference, TLCC, in Washington, D.C. Her talk was titled Embracing Innovation by Partnering for Success. Her talk that day was about Opera Philadelphia, but it's clear that since taking the helm at Austin Opera nearly 4 years ago, Annie continues to believe strongly in innovative partnerships. You'll hear about that in a moment. Annie is vice chair of the Opera America Board of Trustees. In 2017, she was selected as an emerging nonprofit leadership fellow at the Aspen Institute and was named a 2017 Mover and Shaper by Musical America. Now, as for this present moment, as opera companies began closing their doors due to COVID-19, Austin Opera was one of the very first opera companies to launch a digital programming series with original content. Called Live from Indy Terrace, it offers 30-minute broadcasts featuring opera artists every Friday at 3 p.m. I've personally tuned in via Facebook for the last few weeks, and they were really terrific. Interesting to note, last Friday, Annie was joined on the broadcast by a Girl Scout that appears to be sheltering in place with her. So now, without any further ado, I am pleased to welcome Annie Burridge.
Hi, Andrew. It's so great to see your face.
Oh, likewise, Annie. How are you doing?
I am okay. I am sheltering in place with a little Girl Scout, a great husband, and two very fluffy cats. April was supposed to be Austin Opera Month for the Girl Scouts of Central Texas, and they were supposed to come to our production of Turandot. So we're excited that we found a way to pivot their participation to our online, our new digital programming series, Live from Indy Terrace. And since the Girl Scouts were all especially tuning into our past broadcast, my daughter decided to co-host with me, which was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is fantastic, and it was really fun to see a little face in there amongst all of the opera stars. So you when you got to Austin, you were a newbie in town, right? You had not been there before. I mean, if you think of the two words in the title, Austin Opera, they are, archetypally quite different. Opera is traditional and formal, perhaps, if you think of a stereotype. Pearls, tuxedos. Austin, on the other hand, is techie and informal and innovative and jeans and boots and weird. There's some dissonance in there. How did you think about that coming in as sort of the new kid in Austin?
That's such a great question. And I was a new kid in Austin. I actually never traveled to Austin, Texas until I was in the interview process for this job. And I certainly fell in love with the city, like so many people who travel to Austin fall in love with the city. And your assessment of it is quite accurate. It's such a unique city where jeans count as formal business attire. And we do have a thriving tech sector. It accounts for 35% of our local economy. I think since the 80s, Austin has been referred to as Silicon Hills because of the number of secondary major tech headquarters we have here, like Apple and Google and Samsung, IBM, Dell. We're also home to thousands of entrepreneurial startups. And to be honest, that's really what attracted me to the job at Austin Opera. The company had a somewhat traditional reputation, and I thought there was a really intriguing opportunity to perhaps better align the organization and its programming with the city in which it operated. And so after I got here, we started working on a new vision statement and a new values statement to try and better align with our community. Our vision statement, our long-term goal really was to become considered a critical civic asset to Austinites, and even to Austinites who didn't particularly love opera. And then we created a value statement to sort of guide our work toward that long-term goal of becoming, a real valued critical civic asset. And our values also reflect our community. For example, one of our values is that we embrace the lean startup mentality. Like, we actually value experimentation. We also value database decision making, which has become especially critical trying to navigate through these current times. We also launched a new programming series and a new sub-brand for the company called Opera ATX. And with that, we take opera outside of our large venue here in Austin, and we bring it to smaller, unexpected venues, historic bars, historic live music venues. My staff has heard me say 1,000 times that Austin sits at the intersection of innovation and barbecue, and our job is to somehow drive the company closer to that intersection.
Wow. Well, I mean, it seems like that potential dissonance you've turned into a real opportunity for you, with vision and planning and partnerships. And I know we're going to talk more about the partnerships, but when it comes to the plans, a famous boxer once said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Our whole sector was punched in the mouth about 8 weeks ago. I wonder if you can reflect now, just even with the hindsight of even 6 or 8 weeks, on the moment that you realized Austin Opera was closing for an indefinite period of time, and how you thought about that moment, and how perhaps some of those values and plans came into focus for you.
Much of it is a blur, but I think for us it was March 12th when we realized that our business, as we had come to know it, this business of producing opera, was about to come to a very abrupt halt for the first time in any of our careers. I distinctly remember the morning of Friday the 13th, the morning of March 13th. I woke up at 4 a.m. with a new set of company guidelines, company priorities, almost half written in my head. And so I got on my computer, fleshed them out a bit more, and sent them off in the early morning hours to my board leadership and to my staff leadership to see if they made sense. I already told you that when I first got to Austin, we immediately, embarked on this planning process. And I would say those same instincts kind of kicked right back in with this crisis. And so among these new priorities was the identification to find creative paths forward to provide art, connectedness. If that wasn't a very apparent part of what we do before, it certainly is now. And third, employment for artists. And within 7 days, we launched a new digital programming series of original content called Live from Indy Terrace, which fulfills all three of these priorities. So every Friday at 3 p.m., we broadcast a half-hour concert. We were able to capture 3 of these concerts, these recitals, in our rehearsal studio, which is located at 3009 Industrial Terrace, hence the name Live from Indy Terrace. And then we went to shelter in place here in Austin. And so we've had to become more creative in how we continue to produce mostly original content. But we haven't run out of ideas yet. We just broadcast our 7th episode, the picture you showed at the top of the webinar. And yeah, look, we only employ 2 to 4 artists with each broadcast, but we do compensate them well for their time and for their talent. We've received great feedback from our artists that, preparing their episode and preparing their recital has really lifted their spirits. We've received great feedback, of course, from our audience and our donors. And our Facebook reach has increased 598% over the course of a month. So that's something. At the same time, though, we're managing through the same devastating cancellations that likely everyone on this webinar are dealing with. We had 2 of our 4 season productions left to go when everything was shut down. So next up was our Opera ATX production of Winterreise, Schubert's Winterreise or Winter Journey. And we were set to conclude the season for the massive production of Puccini's Turandot. We were able to pivot our production of Winter Journey, and I know we'll talk about that a bit more, but Turandot, there's no way to move forward. It takes at least 130 artists to bring together to perform. So we had to cancel it. We were able to provide partial compensation to all 130 of those contracted artists. Of course, it's an extraordinary revenue loss for the organization. All this to say, we are still operating in the same very challenging climate filled with uncertainty as anyone else. Upon reflection, which you asked me to do in preparation for our talk today, a little reflection, I would say the one strength that we brought into this crisis was a really great organizational culture. We've had 100% staff retention over the past 3 years. And so this team, we have worked together for quite some time. We know each other, we trust each other. We have worked through differences. We have faced challenges together. We also have a great working relationship with our board. Neither of these things just appeared overnight, and they are the result of a lot of work and extraordinary leadership from every facet of the organization, from trustees, from many staff members, junior staff members, senior staff members, but having that really positive workplace culture in place for several months before we went into this entirely new way of doing work. Because of that, we really feel we have a fighting chance at kind of innovating our way through this as opposed to ducking and covering our way through this. I know we'll come out on the other end, hopefully stronger, definitely smarter.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really impressive how you've it seems like at 4 a.m. you kind of took stock not only of your values but also of the assets you already had. I think that it's so easy in a time like this to scramble and try to do totally new or different things, but it feels like, to use an overused term, you've leaned into things that already matter to you. You talk about supporting your artists, you talk about partnerships, you talk about, I think what you just said, in innovating through crisis. As I was preparing for this talk, I went back and looked at your 2016 talk from the stage at TLCC, which seems like 5,000 years ago now. And it struck me how consistent you are as a thinker and a leader. I actually wrote down a couple of things that you said in that talk, because while you were talking about Opera Philadelphia, it could very easily match what you're working on now. You said the most effective partnerships come when both parties have something unique and vital to bring to the table. And you actually implored the audience at the end to consider partnership as a means to deliver on all the extraordinary things that your organizations have to offer your communities. Even in the first part of this talk, you've mentioned partnering with the Girl Scouts. You've mentioned partnering with other organizations around town for the Opera ATX. I'm wondering, leading up to this moment and in this moment, can you dive a little deeper into the importance of partnership and innovation today for Austin Opera?
Absolutely. And, first I want to give some credit to Opera Philadelphia. I spent 9 years there. I really grew up there as an artistic administrator. I started as the grant writer, and 9 years later was managing director. And collaboration is just core to that company's values. And what I've learned here at Austin Opera, our culture, it only works when you have, kind of a 100% buy-in from your team and from your trustees. And it was the same at Opera Philadelphia. I really, I bought into that view of leadership, and I've carried it with me, and I'll carry it through the rest of my career. And, spending 9 years in an organization, you get to really see the results of values, and there's a huge payoff. And so I just now, moving forward, will never question the value of collaboration and the importance of, bringing something to the table every time you embark on partnership or collaboration. And so, the Winter Journey production pivot that I alluded to, that is 100% of the result of a collaborative effort, which we never thought would be the outcome at the time. But so let me rewind a bit. This past September, we launched an Austin Opera Innovation Council comprised of local tech leaders, local immersive technology leaders in particular, and we tasked them with envisioning the future of the operatic experience. So I think, our sectors have a lot in common, but very little history of collaboration. And I thought, well, maybe if we form this council, it might spark some further partnerships and perhaps begin to develop some answers to some of the big picture questions that many of us in legacy art forms have been asking ourselves for some time. So 2 of the members of that council are the CEO and the creative director of a local firm here in Austin called Subversive. It's an immersive technology firm. We also, there's their picture. We also hired 2 artists really at the leading edge of technology in opera to be artistic advisors to the council. And so this is Vida Saikun and David Adam Moore, and they're the founders of Glimmer, which is a production collective in New York. And so we hired David and Vida here to serve as artistic advisors to the council to keep us abreast of the most exciting work that's already being done in the field. What are the important conversations when it comes to technology and immersive experiences in opera that are already happening? So hopefully we can join them, not try to parallel or reinvent them. So we launched this council in September. Took about 6 to 9 months, I would say, to build the membership of this council in advance, to find people who are not only experts in these fields, but who also had some real interest and intellectual curiosity about opera and its potential. So fast forward to March, worldwide shutdown. The next production we had scheduled, as I said, was our Opera ATX production of Winter Journey. As most of you know, Winter Journey is a song cycle by Schubert that documents the grief and the loneliness of a man who's trying to cope with losing the love of his life. And the production that we were going to mount was Vida Saikun and David Adam Moore's production. You can see it pictured here. It's a beautiful production. It stars David Adam Moore. And this beautiful experience they created consists of 24 films to go along with the 24 songs in the song cycle. And those films are projected onto the all-white set, which you can see here, and onto David Adam Moore himself, who was dressed all in white for the duration of the production. The Innovation Council knew all about this production. One, because it was the baby of the artistic advisors to the council and does make great use of technology in its design. Also, our next Innovation Council meeting was scheduled to be on the set of Winter Journey. So we had that in place. They knew all about this production. And when we made our first company announcement that our final 2 productions of the season wouldn't be able to move forward as planned, I immediately got an email from the CEO of Subversive, Anthony Burke, and he said, I think we have the personnel and the equipment to give this piece a second life. And so now we are in the middle of pivoting this show from a proscenium production to an immersive film experience that we can make available to a global audience. And, we're not just filming the production that would have taken place. However, if I could get that, I'd take it and run. I'd be thrilled. But we have such brilliant minds at the table that they are re-envisioning the production to make use of all its current assets, like you see here, but capture them in a new way that really makes sense to be consumed in a digital medium. So there will be a rawness and an immediacy to this journey of grief that this protagonist goes on throughout 24 songs that may bring an entirely new realm of relevance to this piece in the year 2020. And, Andrew, you're hearing how excited and how animated I get, when talking about this project, because it is so important and so precious to be able to make art right now during this time, and especially art that seems to make sense given what we're all facing out there. The real bonus of this project, right, is that it's causing my organization to stretch and grow in entirely new ways. And what a gift if we wind up on the other side of this with increased institutional capacity.
And I
So,
just, yeah. Please.
I was just going to say, you know, in summary, so, I mean, it's a really exciting project. It has kept us going. It has kept our spirits up. And it's absolutely would not have happened without the partnerships and the friends that we've built over the past year and a half. So we're so grateful.
Yeah, no, it's just, I get goosebumps just seeing those pictures. When you sent them over last week, a number of us on the team sort of had a little, you know, culture nerd freak out just because it just is, I mean, so here's this 200-year-old piece, and you and I both went to music school, so we were having a moment about, you know, every music student studies Winterreise.
Yep.
But if you're not, you know, if you're not steeped in this world, it can be a little opaque, right? It's a song cycle. It's 24 songs sung by a tenor with a piano in German about sort of the existential dread of life, right? I mean, talk about a stereotype. And yet, if you take the nut, the emotional core of that work is more, you know, as relevant today as it was in the 1820s. But the delivery of it is something that has to be considered. And so seeing that emotional work of those words and that music brought together in a way that is immediate to today's audience, that I can see in those pictures, I can only imagine what an immersive experience would be. You know, getting inside the head of the protagonist, getting inside the head of Schubert himself in a way. Something new is going to come out of this, right? Something new, whether it is, you know, grafting a digital performance onto the web, or a performance onto the web, or whether it is waiting it out and getting back into the concert hall or the opera house, or is it something completely new, like what you're experimenting with here? I think is incredibly exciting, and I share your enthusiasm about this.
I agree that many new things are going to result from this. But Andrew, you know, I do not have the great wisdom to predict all those, you know, on my own. Plus, you know, while just scrambling every day to run the organization. And so I'm just so glad that we put together a group of really smart people several months ago to start asking these questions, and that we can now go back to them and say, well, I think our timeline has sped up by a few decades. You know, what are some of the answers? What are some of the answers here? Because, you know, I'm good at asking the questions, but I do not have all the answers by a long shot.
Well, and I think, you know, that the phrase "fortune favors the prepared mind" sort of comes to mind here. Where, you know, one could say you got really lucky. You know, you happened to be focusing on partnerships and innovation when this hit, and now you're leveraging partners and innovation to advance your mission in a time where it's really hard to advance your mission. So in addition to congratulating you on being prepared for that, I think for anyone listening right now, again, it's sort of taking stock of what are the superpowers you've got today as a company.
Yep.
You know, you have a superpower of community involvement. You have the superpower of an innovation council that's really invested. And different companies will have different superpowers. You know, our guest last week, Scott Stuhlin at the Filbert Museum of Art, has a garden, and so they tripled the size of the garden to be a vegetable garden to feed the community. Right, that's one of their superpowers. So I just think it's a wonderful way of that you've come to think about this and really amplify what you're already working on. So you said relevance. It's one of those words that's just bouncing all over. I mean, it has been for years anyway, but now especially. My final question before we get to Q&A, and for folks listening, feel free to pop questions into the chat panel at any time. My last question is about relevance. And I feel like you've already given us a glimmer into how opera might transform in the future. But in a moment where the world is focused on health and safety and economic security and all of those things that we have to be focused on, my question for you, Annie, is why does opera matter right now?
You know, I am 42 years old, and this is the fourth major crisis I've encountered in my career. Three of them, were shared by all of us: 9/11, 2008 recession, now this one. One was an institution-specific crisis, but I feel like I've seen my fair share of crisis in my age 42. And Andrew, this crisis feels different. I remember after 9/11 and in 2008, I remember artists asking the question, does what we do matter? Artists themselves pondering, like, is art of value? And I'm not hearing any of that right now. Certainly many of us may be questioning the stability of our career. That has certainly never seemed more precarious or more fragile. But I've never heard so many affirmations of its value. And so one great example, 3M, which is a major PPE supplier to the front lines. They also have a big headquarters here in Austin, and they support us. And our very diligent development team, wrote to keep them updated on what we're doing at the company and let them know about the launch of Live from Indy Terrace. And they wrote back. I can't believe they wrote back in the middle of all this. To let us know that they had forwarded the Live from Indy Terrace information to their entire workforce and asked them to tune in as a method of self-care. And they said, thank you so much for doing this. We have never needed music more. We are so proud to be your partner. This is 3M, like sticky notes, scotch tape, ventilators. I don't know, they make everything. They wrote to Austin Opera, Little Austin Opera, and said, we are so proud to be your partners. I mean, people who do our job, Andrew, we wait our whole lives for someone to say something like that. I feel sometimes like we spend our days shouting into the void, like, what we do matters, it makes a difference, I swear, please donate now. And I just have had no trouble really making the case this time around. There have been 24 articles written about our winter journey and our Live from Indy Terrace broadcast. So that is an indication that what we are all doing right now, it matters. And it will take time. It will take more time than we want for people to feel comfortable to come back into our theaters. And in the meantime, we will come up with some much needed new strategies for the evolution of our art forms, for what we produce, how we produce it, how we can disseminate how we produce it. But we will go back into the theaters, and I really think that our audience will meet us there with a new sense of gratitude for that shared experience.
Oh, thank you. Your enthusiasm and optimism is always infectious. So. And it's just incredible to hear that story about 3M and all of the work that they're doing in the midst of all of this. But I mean, obviously the iconic piece of all of this, I think that we've all seen in Italy of the opera singer out on the balcony.
Exactly.
It's incredibly important. We have a little bit of time now for some questions from our audience. So if you're ready, I'm gonna launch right in. So the first question, you mentioned that you've had 100% staff retention over the past 3 years, which is pretty remarkable in the arts. Some thoughts on how you've achieved that?
Well, it gets easier once you gather some momentum, but we have a team now that stands so firmly in our institutional values, and they very much reflect a lot of our personal values as well. And you become able to hire for that, right? Because during the hiring process, you can discern what really lights a fire under people. And if it's something different than what your organization stands for and is striving to succeed, that your company's not going to be the best fit for someone else. And I would also say, even if you hire someone and it turns out pretty quickly that it's not going to be a great fit, you can make a decision there really, really swiftly that's going to be in the best interest of all parties. But, this whole culture thing, I probably make my staff like just bonkers because I talk about it all the time. They are as important to its creation and nurturing and survival. And they give me a lot of tips. I get advice, from my team and from my trustees all the time. But it's my job to just relentlessly beat the drum on how important workplace culture is and how important our values are in every decision that we make. And we just don't drop it. We have, even in our conference room, we have a lot of our values and our goals for the year, mounted on big pieces of poster board. So we're just always looking at them and revisiting them. And it's my job, I feel like, as the leader of the organization, to obviously try my best to live those values and live that culture in a way that makes people want to stay engaged and stay with the company, but really just to create the mechanism so that we're all checking in on those things and make sure that we're not losing sight of them. Also, my company has 16 people year round, so that's different than a company with 60 or 100. It's a little bit closer. When we start to veer off course, you can feel it and sense it pretty quickly, and so I can go get help. I can go get advice from an executive coach, or I have some trustees who really excel at these things. And I'm like, what can you see that I can't see? Why does this feel different? Why are things a little more tense right now? And so it just, getting outside advice on, consistently monitoring that culture is important.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about culture with the team. I think that I will admit that a lot of times we talk about culture as a senior management team and sort of expect that sort of naturally permeates the rest of the team, but to actually be directly talking to everybody on your team about culture, it's really good advice. And I think, 16 versus 600, I think that large organizations atomize naturally into teams of 8, 10, 12, 15. So I think thinking about team cohesion and team culture, even in a larger organization, there's a lot of relevance there. We have another question. So as I mentioned at the start, you are the vice chair of the Opera America board. To the extent that you can you give us a little bit of a window on how the sector is thinking about things right now in this age? What are you talking about?
Sure. Well, Opera America has done a great job of keeping us together. I'm on a Zoom call every week with all the general directors of the level 1 and level 2 opera companies in the United States. Smaller opera companies are also getting together. We have, webinars and meetings going constantly. The strength of our service organizations like Tessitura and Opera America it's so much appreciated right now. Yeah, and the field in general, some of us produce on a stagione season like Austin Opera, so we've been living in this reality for 8 weeks. Some opera companies that operate summer festivals are still trying to figure out if they can pull something together in August. So we're all at like different stages of the grief process. There are some markets that have clarity that they are not allowed to be back in their big hall until January. And so they have just leapt out of the starting gate and figuring out what they can do during that time. No one's interested in going dark, that's for sure. And so I've really enjoyed talking to some of my colleagues in some of the cities where they know they can't do their fall productions as planned, to hear what they're thinking about instead. Great innovative ideas that combine live performance with, simulcast or broadcast mediums. Like we're seeing in the corporate world, right? Companies that were in a really precarious financial position going into this, are starting to, this is kind of the death blow. So I'm thinking, J. Crew or, Macy's or Neiman Marcus. And I think the same you could say applied after 9/11 or 2008, those that were in a very precarious position going into this, and not just financially, but I would say organizationally. There may be a few institutions that don't survive this, but I do think the vast majority will. And what I'm seeing is a tremendous amount of heart and hustle and innovation And the things that we're addressing here, you know, my class of general directors, those of us who have come into the job over the past, you know, 5 to 6 years, we've been talking about these issues of digital capture and digital dissemination for years. So it's not as if there's like some kind of wake up call. We're like, yeah, well, we knew this was happening. We didn't think it would happen this way. And so now those conversations are just accelerating more quickly. There's tremendous camaraderie too. I spend much of my week on the phone or on Zoom calls with other general directors. There's not a lot of competition in the opera world. You know, we're all pretty spread out. And so we're just desperate for great ideas and we share them willingly with each other.
That's great to hear. Some more questions coming in. Yeah, I noticed this too. It was great to hear your determination to provide meaningful work for your artists. You mentioned that a couple of times. Artists need to be creating art. Can you elaborate any more on your thinking around that?
Well, you know, I'm sure, you know, we've all seen the discussions of force majeure in our contracts, right? And there's certainly a time and a place for force majeure, but no one ever envisioned a worldwide 12 to 18 month force majeure. And, you know, people in my position, half of my staff are reformed opera singers. You know, I'm a recovering coloratura. And we understand the life, we understand the work. Most of us went into administration because we realized we had better skills and better talents to serve this art form that we just believe in with all of our hearts on the administrative side than we had to offer in performance or on the stage. There is just no more important group of stakeholders, of suppliers, if you want to look at it from a business perspective, than our artists. And you know, that's why you've seen so many companies do all they can to compensate artists to the extent that we can, even though almost all of us had these force majeure clauses that didn't require us to do it legally. I'm really proud, you know, that not only that we do it, but my board supported that decision 100%. And it's really easy for an organization to go into like constrict and survival mode, you know, and like put the organization above the people that make the organization real. And I'm so grateful to have a board of trustees who didn't make that call. They've been so supportive of our artists. And yeah, you know, I was asked on another webinar, you know, do you think it's insensitive to start staging grand opera again sometime soon? And that's no, I don't care. I'm like, I want to get as many artists safely and comfortably performing for real money as soon as possible.
Yeah.
That's what I feel. It's a big, just feel a huge responsibility. That's my job is. And also, you know, being at a company where we don't perform constantly throughout the season, we have 4 shows a year. It's not like a Chicago Lyric where they're constantly have a show running. We can feel the difference between when we're in production and when we're out. And it's a lot more fun to do our jobs like when we're in production. We get how exciting and how meaningful it is to create. To create art and to do it by paying people. You know, I've also been approached by folks who said, well, why don't we do a fundraiser and get the artists to donate their time? I was like, no, all for a fundraiser, but we are not asking artists to donate their time and talent right now. Absolutely not.
Yeah, well, I think that the livelihood is unbelievably important, and the work, right? And just being able to do the craft, the thing that you are trained, and the thing that brings you joy, is something that even when we were talking last week preparing for this, it just kept coming through, and so much of what we were talking about, not you know, for the artists and also for your team as well, to be able to feel that. How are you keeping your customers, business partners, and vendors engaged during this time frame?
Oh, you know, so thank you for that question. At some point a few weeks ago, I said to my team, I said, I think that, you know, we always consider our art, you know, we could also refer to it as a product line, you know, that to be our productions or some of our events. I said, I think for the next several months, we also have to consider communication, just the art of communication in itself, to be, you know, part of our season lineup, part of our product line. So, you know, we have really doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on communication. You know, of course, we sent out some official company correspondence as this first hit to share news in general. We have a company newsletter that we call Inside Indy Terrace. And so we've increased that. We used to do that maybe 4 or 5 times a year. We've increased that frequency to monthly. We've also added what I call investor reports. So beginning 2 years ago, Jennifer Baston and Melissa Rogan, great leaders on my team, were able to start putting together our first official annual reports. And it occurred to us that, maybe an annual report isn't quite frequent enough. And we wanted to start producing more frequent investors reports because, frankly, the way we're using our investors' money, our donors' money, is a little bit different than we anticipated several months ago. So we published this, you can see here on April 21st, we plan to do one every 4 weeks that just updates our patrons on programmatically how we're doing, financially in terms of the big picture, how are we doing. I've mentioned that we've been in constant contact with our board. I meet with my senior team and I meet with our executive committee weekly. All of our normal committee meetings and board meetings are happening remotely as well. And so we wanted to be able to carry the appropriate amount of information from all those meetings to the rest of our stakeholders so that they're informed. There's a lot of email going out these days. And so we found that, emailing's great. But we also are figuring out how to get things in the mail using a mail house or using, one person in the office at a time to get things out in via snail mail as well, to just triple make sure that folks can get access to the information we have. And of course, I'm so proud of my team, as they've always been great at jumping in wherever it needed to happen. In a small company, I don't think you have the type of silos that can build in a larger company anyway, but that's definitely not part of our culture. And so I've got fundraising people who are selling subscriptions and vice versa. And so we have a pretty consistent onslaught of people reaching out by phone as well. And so this is a top piece of what we produce right now. We produce communication. Oh, and we also, after we sent out the investor report, we then scheduled a number of Zoom calls with all of our donor groups where people could join for an hour, and I talk them through the investor report and they can ask questions. We had one longtime donor who I love, who tuned in and said, "Oh, the report was great." And at the end of the hour-long call, she's like, "I really just tuned in to make sure you hadn't had a nervous breakdown. I'm so glad to see that y'all seem to be okay."
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh. I love that you call it an investor report. I think that first of all, it speaks to the culture of Austin. That startup mentality that you talk about. But even out, it doesn't matter what city you're in. I feel like thinking of your donors and sort of your family, as Michael Kaiser calls them, as really your investors. And it's not so much a return on investment as a return on creativity or a return on art or a return on innovation in your case. But what a great way to position that and help people be part of your story. So, and thank you, speaking of helping people be part of your story, thank you, Annie, for sharing your story with all of us today. Always a pleasure. I mentioned this in an email to you that you are our first Innovator three-peat. You did a traditional Innovator for us a number of years ago. You were on our stage at TLCC, and now you have been one of our very first Innovators in Conversation. So thank you, as always, for your knowledge and sharing all that you're doing with us. And before you go, I would also like to keep you on the line here as I announce next week's Innovator in Conversation. Will be Claire Spencer, CEO of Art Center Melbourne, who is joining us obviously from Australia, and can't wait to speak with Claire. I know you and Claire have spent time at our conferences in the past, so hope that you can tune in, hope that everyone can tune in as we speak with Claire. We're doing this at a different time of day so that our friends in Australia can join in. And otherwise, thank you once again, Annie. Best of luck to you and to Austin Opera in the days and weeks that follow. Can't wait to hear how Winter's Journey comes out.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your leadership. Hang in there, everyone.
Yeah, yes, ditto. Thanks.